So this is Nancy Hines Glazer, and welcome to another one of our wonderful Meet the Artist programs. I'm doing a series called Artist as Documentarian, Recording Our Life and Times. And what better way than to have two fantastic poets in our area with me this evening. We have Michael Lally and Jose Funes. Welcome, welcome. Very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I know a lot of people out there find writing a mystery as much as they find doing art a mystery. So we're here for you guys to tell us how to unravel the mystery. But most of all, we're going to start. I know that we can do a little bit of that, Michael, because you and I have talked at length. You're both from South Orange now, right?
Yeah, I was actually born in Orange Memorial Hospital, which doesn't exist anymore.
And of course, you're dating yourself now.
Yeah,
it's okay.
It's quite all right.
It's okay. And Jose, you came to South Orange kind of by a different route, correct?
Oh, I came through many different routes. Originally, I came to attend Seton Hall University. That was back in 1985. And the location and the town itself just became enamored with it. So I've been here ever since.
Right, and originally you're from El Salvador.
I was born in El Salvador.
And your dad came to the area, and he traveled a lot.
Yeah.
And I find something pretty fascinating, the way the two of you met. And I think it's important for our viewers because they really need to know the importance of a treasure we have in this town. How did you two meet?
Yeah, it's actually rather interesting. The first time I met Michael Lally was actually through the adult school, which has classes here at Columbia University as well as some of the other schools. I mean, Columbia High School as well as some of the other local public schools. And originally I had the intention that I needed to explore poetry as a form of expression. I had been fiddling around with it I had begun with it for the only reason that anyone ever gets to poetry or starts a rock band to win a girl. So.
Did it work?
No, actually did not.
You're still working in it.
I'm still working on that, actually. It's an ongoing process. So, because I wanted to learn a little bit more about the writing process and get a little bit better at it, I saw this class I was being given at the adult school, being taught by Michael Lally, and it mentioned his biography about his accomplishments, and it seemed like a good place to start. And once I got in after the first class, I was hooked. He was so, it was so fresh and engaging approach that I had ever heard before, like in college or high school, where they made poetry seem so arduous.
And not approachable, not easy to get a grip on.
No, it was very hard to come around it. There was all this edgy corners and sides to it, and at the workshop that we were doing with Michael, it just seemed very approachable. It seemed like you could approach it in any way that you wanted to, provided you were being honest. And been hooked since.
And honesty, I know, is very much a trait that you have, Michael. How many books have you written now of poetry?
Well, I've got there's been 27 books published, but I've probably written a lot more.
Yeah, as I
I'm
said.
kind of a graphomaniac.
A graphomaniac. Well, I think that's a pretty good quality, not a bad thing. But so how many English teachers did you send crying out of the room? Tell me a little bit about that. First of all, you're from this area, you're born and raised, you're real rooted, and your poetry is definitely rooted here.
Well, I grew up in South Orange in the 40s and 50s and left in around 1960, and thought I'd never be back, but I did. I came back in 1999. I had been living in LA for close to 20 years, and I'd lived in New York City and Washington, D.C. before that. And vice versa, New York before that, and so on. But and I'd lived a lot of places around the country. But I had another little child. I have two grown children that I raised on my own, mostly in New York and in California. And then I have an 11-year-old son named Flynn, who I didn't want to raise in L.A. His mother and I didn't want to raise him in L.A. So we ended up here in Maplewood.
And back to your roots.
Back to the roots.
Yeah.
I never expected it.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things, I know your poetry a little better than Jose's, but one of the things I found so interesting is you really do use your growing up years as an Irish immigrant
Well, my Irish immigrant grandparents, I grew up in the
Grandparents.
street right behind us, on Hickson Place. And that area between Valley Street and Academy Street, when I was a little kid, was known as either Cabbage Town or Cabbage Hill, because it was so Irish. It was mixed, but it was predominantly Irish. And then on the other side, on the west side of Valley Street, up to Church Street, to Lackawanna Place, those places, they were pretty predominantly Italian. Sloane Street and First, Second, and Third between Sloane and Valley were mostly African Americans. So, you know, we all mixed, but that was in those days, in the 40s and 50s, ethnicity, those dominant ethnicities in South Orange at least were sometimes volatile, you know?
Well, and it was its own little inner city, even
It
though it was a
People
small
don't think of
village.
it. When I wrote the South Orange Sonnets in the 1960s, and they came out in around 70, started being published around 70, and were published as a book in 72, and won an award at the Manhattan in New York, the 92nd Street Y Poetry Award, Discovery Award, and so people started finding out about it, and I would run into people in Hollywood who had come from South Orange, and they'd say, you know, I read that book of yours, I don't remember South Orange being anything like that. And I'd say, well, where did you live?
Well, and that's a
And
good
when.
point. And when, right. Now, Jose, coming here from another country, has it affected how you see South Orange? Have you guys compared notes? Or is the language of poetry sort of
Well,
really not rooted in a community, but
no,
more
actually,
within
it is.
yourself?
I think it's very much rooted, but at least that's been an approach that I've enjoyed discovering. I mean, it's certainly not my approach, not the only person that thinks of that way. I know Michael does, and certainly some of my favorite poets have always talked about the idea of being very specific to your location. And
Well, that was William Carlos Williams' great advice, and he's the great New Jersey poet, as well as Whitman, since he was from Long Island, but he ended up in Camden. So, but Williams was born and bred in Rutherford, you know, and worked in Paterson with working class families as a doctor, and wrote about it in stories and in his poetry, and was a great inspiration to anybody from this area, you know. There's a lot of incredible creative talent from New Jersey, and particularly this part of New Jersey, you know.
Gravitating. Well, that's why the show is so easy to do, because I don't have to work very hard.
Yeah.
you certainly are so many talented writers. I mean, I have many friends that are not just poets, but writers in many fields, adult books, children's books, and you know, they're all wonderful, and I steal a little bit from all of them. I've stolen a lot from Michael in the idea of being specific, and certainly about South Orange. I mean, his first book that I read very carefully, and I did it because I really enjoyed discovering about South Orange, was It's Not Nostalgic, which has a lot of the South Orange sonnets in it.
Right. And
And-
also Catch My Breath, right?
Catch My
Yeah, Catch My Breath was kind of an earlier version, but it's out of print.
Yeah.
This was a bigger, thicker one, which, this actually won the 2000 American Book Award,
Wonderful, wonderful.
so that was nice.
So that must feel good also to be working with somebody
Feels
who's
great.
an emerging poet,
Feels great.
because
No, he's
to
not
pass it on,
He's not
he's
emerging.
past emerge, he's
past
already
emerge.
out
No,
of the
he's-
cocoon.
He's full flown. He's
Okay.
an incredible poet,
Well-
and it's a great pleasure to have somebody, and you know, all the people in this area that I know who are accomplished or just passionate about it. It's, you know, it makes life worthwhile to be able to share your passion, you know.
Well, you have something coming up, I think, happening, right? And we're
Yes,
lucky enough,
correct.
we have a poster here, and, you know, and I think you have a book of poetry.
Yeah,
So
one
tell
of
us
the
about
things
that.
that we continue doing after having met with Michael is several of us, and that group has in itself morphed and changed as people have moved in and out of the area, was to continue meeting with Michael in a more sort of informal manner, informal workshops. And quite a few years ago, we decided to put out an anthology called A Stone Unturned, based on
Right, that's
Right.
on our shelf over
Correct.
here, right?
and then the group continued, and after several workshops, we've always wanted to be able to put together what we think is a compilation of a lot of the works from those workshops that we shared together, that we have communally worked together on. And the second anthology is Open Doors. And as a matter of fact, we're having an official book party of that on October 25th,
And poetry reading
and a poetry reading.
by these guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
featuring a lot of the other, basically all the individuals that have been, that are featured in the anthology.
And so even though if this show airs and continues to air afterwards, I know there's other things coming up too, but that's at the Stuart Lachey Gallery on Main Street in Melbourne, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, that's the location, yeah.
Yeah, the
And,
former Junior League building.
and the books,
so-
actually, and both anthologies, I think, will be available at the local bookstores.
Wonderful.
They should be available fairly soon, which
Right.
is always a good place to support our little bookstore.
Absolutely. I think I was reading somewhere on one of the websites, we need another bookstore. I know there's one in Maplewood, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, no offense to the nail salon owners, but a few of them have turned into nail salons. So I do hope that trend reverses so we can have at least some bookstores too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so when you met him and he inspired you and he opened you up in the ability to write, did you find a whole new voice that you didn't know you had? Were you always creative?
Well, I certainly was, I had an idea of always being very creative, but never in writing. I mean, perhaps short stories, but it was never an avenue that I felt really comfortable with. As I mentioned before, all my experience with the poetry before in high school and college had been just very controlled, and they felt very adverse to the idea of expressing myself. And one of the things that Michael really helped me tremendously at, as you said, actually, is discovering a voice. I mean, everybody has their own voice. We think every individual thinks in their own manner. Their brain ticks and works totally different from each other. And it's that magic, I think, of when we can transpose what is going on in our brains onto the paper that really creates this very unique music and voice that we all have. And he certainly helped me to discover that.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to give you an opportunity to share that voice with our audience, because I'm going to ask you to read one of your poems, and then Michael will read some South Orange sonnets. So your poem is September 22nd, 2007.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead and give us a listen.
September 22nd, 2007. Autumn. There is no polite way of saying this. Summer has been fun. Summer was frenzy, all heat, blonde, and bare excitement, but don't mistake. I have been waiting for you. Autumn. I love your hues, all tawny and orange makeup, your copper dress, deep brunette skies, your cool temper under all conditions. You, picker of pumpkins, don't deny you're erotic. You are the most sensuous of the seasons. Summer has its legions, yes, but who wants to lie together under the sun, suffer in the wretched heat and humidity? Autumn, you are temperate. You encourage the warm thrill, the appropriate proximity, the breezy persuasion of intimacy. It's time to let go. Autumn. Your archers are only heavy with spoiled memories. And as you know, change is good. Besides, who celebrates bygones but historians? Autumn. Be my lover.
Wonderful. Well, it's autumn, so I certainly think it's going to change everybody's view outside when they take a walk around. Thank you. And Michael, we're going to close out our segment now with something from you. South Orange Sonnets 1 and 2, is that correct?
That's right, 1 and 2. These were written when I was a very young man. 1. In books, it was the Lackawanna Valley. The Lackawanna Railroad ran through it, separating those on the hill from us. Lackawanna Place was the toughest block in the neighborhood until 1952, when the Temptations and Reputation moved to Church Street, where the Pink Devils had roses tattooed between their thumbs and forefingers, wore delicate gold crucifixes on chains around their brown Italian necks, and carried porno playing cards from Newark, the city where parades got lost and statues died. Newark, where we all had lived. 2. My brother bought the moon back from Okinawa. I mean, there they learned of the surrender 3 days late, and then they danced all night. My brother played the saxophone. Jumpman Willie did a one-step that most girls didn't want to do. They called him that for all the old cars he worked on till he was old enough to drive. He was a patty cat like me, and we lived on Cabbage Hill till we were old enough to live anywhere. We believed Italians and Jews ran the syndicate, maybe the world. In West Orange, a man hung himself higher than he could reach.
Well, thank you so much for those incredible words. I know what we're going to do is take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to have a little bit more poetry and a lot more talk. And I'm looking forward to our audience getting inspired by you and maybe taking up poetry themselves, maybe taking a class. Don't go away. Please come on back so you can hear more of our wonderful poetry through Jose Funes and Michael Lally. Thank you.
Faster than searching the World Wide Web. More inspiring than a half-cap mocha latte. Able to answer any question with insight and detail. This superhero of knowledge can find the answer to any question no matter what the problem. And she works in your neighborhood at your public library. When you need to know, get to know your library. Log on to njlibraries.org.
Welcome back to Meet the Artists. Today we're with two wonderful poets, Michael Lally and Jose Funes. In case you just turned in, I hope you're still with us from before. Before we went for break, we talked about you sending all the English teachers scurrying. And I think it's important for the kids out there especially, but even adults. You kept going. Tell us a little bit about that trouble you had.
Well, I don't want to talk too much about it, but I was very good in math and very bad in English because I had a very bad kind of accent, which was common at that time among some of us. And I wrote a combination of what I thought was conversational from my background and trying to make the points I wanted to make instead of following the dictums of the academy, whether it was Our Lady Sorrow's Grammar School or St. Benedict's in Newark, which I got a kind of a scholarship to, mostly for the math. Most English teachers just gave me a hard time about the way I talked and the way I wrote, and I just said, there's no way I'm not going to do this. I had a compulsion since I was little to write, and I have no idea why. My grandparents were from Ireland. They lived at the bottom of that street next to what was then an Esso station, and now is a Blimpies. And I had other cousins on that street and on the next street over, and as far as I know, nobody wrote. Some of them began to write in older, but my father was a 7th grade dropout, and I just felt compelled to write about what I was feeling and the perceptions I had that I didn't see in the movies and in the popular culture or in the books I read, because I've been kind of a print junkie since I was a kid too. And I wanted to tell the truth that as I saw it. Now I realize, there's a million versions of the truth, but back then I thought mine was the only one. And the teachers didn't agree.
Well, they might have been wrong, you think?
Well,
Yeah, and then you went to the service and
I went into
came
the
out.
service for over 4 years. That's how I got out of town, and I ended up going to the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop on the GI Bill. And I actually talked them into letting me, I didn't have a BA, and I talked them into letting me working on a BA and an MFA at the same time. First time they ever did that. I don't know if they've done it since. As long as I got straight A's and did everything right. And I learned an awful lot there, and most of what I learned from my fellow students.
Each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and would you say that's what's been happening with you, Jose, is through working with the other poets that you learn from each other?
Oh, absolutely. It's my first experiences with any kind of poetry before I even went to Michael's workshop was always a very odd. They never felt very communal. I would go to, there's this thing in poetry where people get together and total strangers get together and critique each other's work, and there's a lot of I don't know. I don't know how to put it.
Pettiness?
There's a little bit of pettiness.
Jealousy?
There's a bit of jealousy,
Yeah,
but
it's
that's human.
artistic
That's human
jealousy,
nature. I
right.
think it's more than anything else is artistic competitiveness. And
Mm-hmm.
but with the workshops, and I've been lucky, not just Michael's, but even any other places. It's been very communal. It felt like when I'm working on my poems, I certainly very communal. I warn my fellow poets all the time. I'm just going to steal that line. It's just too lovely a line, and I do try to not steal, but I certainly am very much influenced by everybody. I mean, I love reading anything. I mean, anything from a children's article to a scientific magazine to a great poetry book. Oh, I always feel like I get something out of it. you know.
So you're a big proponent of everybody reading, and reading, and yours is writing, and reading.
Yeah,
Both of you are
reading, yeah.
this way.
Books were my, I always say poetry saved my life, and I believe it still does. I found in books people whose experience of reality and whose beliefs and inner lives validated mine, because in the community as I was growing up, I just felt like I was the only one, you know. I worked my father had a home maintenance business, and we worked in all the wealthy homes around here on the hill and in Tuxedo Park and over by Grove Park and all those neighborhoods. And, you know, I grew up with a chip on my shoulder. I had to work after school every day, and I worked on weekends in Grunnings, which was an ice cream restaurant store, as a busboy and then a dishwasher to make money, because I worked for my father for room and board and so on and so forth. So, you know, I was working all the time, and I was also experiencing in my mind and my perception of this community a very different experience than anybody around me was reflecting. Most of my siblings and cousins and friends in the neighborhood, you know, it was all pretty simple for them. They didn't really think about these things that much. You know, they pretty much followed the path that was set for them. And most of them were very happy, so, you know, it was what was best for them. But I was unhappy in that situation. I tried everything, you know, I went to New York and moved to the Village and the Lower East Side, and lived in Soho before it was Soho, and Tribeca before it was Tribeca, and so on, and other communities like that, and where I found like-minded souls who, you know, for whom art and the creative expression was a life-saving force. It wasn't just some decorative thing that you went and checked out now and then. You know, without it, we'd die. That's what I really believe. It's certainly been the case for me.
And I have an artist I've come to know who calls her entire body of work, Art Saves Lives. She's recovered from brain tumors and surgeries and what have you, and it really did allow her to get beyond her medical conditions. So I think also the artistic bent may have had you looking at things differently, feeling it differently in your younger years. Did you have that growing up also, Jose?
Well, I knew that I always had a feeling that I was very sensitive to things, and I think that's probably the only difference between artists and is that you live the same moments. I mean, no one sees anything differently. We just tend to hang on to them a little bit longer and live through them a lot more vociferously than I think other people do. I mean, I just always feel like certain things shouted at me. I never really expressed it, but I certainly felt that it. I mean, I was very lucky. My mother's side of the family really loved to read. I mean, they encouraged me to read. My uncle gave me the Iliad when I was 10.
Oh.
And I loved that. I just fell in love with the poetry of that and the story. And of course, being an action-adventure sort of poem, that didn't hurt at 10. But since then, I've always felt like I had to read a lot. And even now, I just feel like if you're a writer, I mean, if we are what we eat, you certainly write what you read. And being exposed to all these new worlds, you know, Michael's world view of South Orange, or Frank O'Hara's view of New York, or William Carlos Williams' view of Patterson. You eat this world up, and it gives you something different that you never knew before.
I'm still trying to finish the Iliad, so if
I won't tell you the
finish
ending.
it- Oh, okay, good. Shh, I might finish it next year, I'm sure. But anyway, you also have another event coming up. Did we talk about that,
No, we
Michael?
didn't. On November 8th at the South Orange Studios, which is above and just a few doors down from the Neelam.
Neelam, right,
Neelam
1519
Indian
South
restaurant.
Orange Avenue. I think it is.
1519 South Orange Avenue. On November 8th, which is a Saturday, there's a reception at 7 and a reading at 8. You know, reception with refreshments and so on. An Englishman who's been living in the East Village since the 70s. He was a very close friend of Allen Ginsberg's and a lot of the New York poets, and he's a highly respected, he's kind of a poet's poet. His name is Simon Pettit. He and I will be reading there that evening. And I think there's an $8 admission charge to help defray the costs of him getting over here from the east side, Lower East Side.
And well worth it, actually,
Oh,
because I know,
absolutely.
well, you know, you've been a lot of different places. People come to hear you speak all the time and read your poetry and follow you. And I know, as you said, he's not emerging. He's already out of the
Yeah,
cocoon.
Jose gives readings in New York all the time.
Well, you were mentioning that. Where is it that you did that, Jose? Because I'm just not.
Well, I have an upcoming reading in the Village at November the 3rd at the Telephone Bar and Grill. It's a small little place on 9th and 2nd Avenue. It's a lovely little place. The people who run it do this wonderful job of like always focusing on young upcoming writers of all genres, not just poetry, thankfully. It's a
Wonderful.
pleasure to go to the readings there.
So we have to keep an eye out because you guys are everywhere. You're everywhere, as they say, right? Now you've already written one book?
Yes, I put
Anthology?
together a collection of poems
Was that this one?
Mhm.
Okay.
called
Oh, that one.
41 poems.
Okay.
Most of them inspired through the workshops, and some of them older poems that I had kept around. And I sort of dedicated it to both my parents and to a good friend who unfortunately passed away. He was a long time, George Conweiser, who was a long-time member of the original workshops, and a man who truly loved poetry and loved people. And after his death, I just felt inspired to just put this down. There were a lot of things that I was going through at that time, so it really helped me to just focus on getting that book out.
Would you say that kids really need to have that fostered because it'll help them through troubled times? I mean, I know our schools
If
are
they can.
incredible here, so I know they do work. They have something called Guild Script, which is a publication that's just phenomenal. It's poetry and prose. But do you think you had enough of that when you were young?
Oh, no,
Did you
not
get
at all.
that? Not
the
you.
background.
Okay. No. And did you?
I felt like I was lucky enough that both my parents, I mean, my father was it's one of the things that I think I always find admirable is that much like Michael, he worked really hard his way through it, and he didn't have the appreciation for the arts that was given to him by his family. I mean, he dropped out of high school because he had to help out at home.
Your dad?
Yeah, and he finished high school at night while he was working during the day. So, but he knew that there was something important about it, and both he and my mother always fostered me to find something.
Unfortunately, when I was growing up, the time and the circumstances, my father's response when I was a teenager and he came home and I came home and he had opened my mail, he thought he had the right to because he paid the bills.
Because you lived there.
And I had sent some poems out to a magazine and they'd been rejected, and his response was, "Who do you think you are? Think you can write about, worldly things? You're a kid.
What's the matter with
What do you know?"
I want to thank you very much because I think you'll be inspiring a lot of adults and kids out there to go ahead and get busy and write, find their own voice,
Yeah.
and pursue it,
Or just read,
or read, and maybe through reading you'll find the journey that you're supposed to be on, right?
Mhm.
Okay. I really, really want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was really terrific. I'm
You're welcome.
hoping to see more of you, hear more of you, as I'm sure everyone is. So, Michael, why don't you take us out?
Thanks. This is a more recent sonnet written last March after the death of my last living brother. I have one sister left. I'm the youngest of 7. John Adams is still missed by some. Others miss Thomas Jefferson. Jonathan Williams, endless campaigns, how debased the word has become. The loss of my brother Robert, the quirks of our clan, the culture we come from, or what I haven't figured out yet and maybe never will. I'm grateful my adolescent disappointment and anger over the foibles and mistakes, even wrongs, has given way to an acceptance that transcends expectations of a perfection we're all incapable of. And then just one short poem to my boy Flynn. Before you were born, I knew how to be happy. The secret isn't a secret. Just feel grateful enough, and the heart opens up and becomes love going out, which is the secret. But what to be grateful for when they've robbed the store and are making off with our money and our country? That's easy. You.
Fantastic. Well, that one's for you, Flynn. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the inspiration. Honest to goodness,
Thanks,
I was a little worried about the poetry. Didn't know how to do it. I don't think we've ever had it done before, but boy, was it worth it. And I hope it was worth it for you. See ya.
Shamrock Road, Shamrock comes up quiet on Shamrock